I stood in the opulent ballroom of the Grand Hyatt in Manhattan, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and champagne. At 45, I, Serena Brooks Davis, had built my life around moments like this, corporate galas where deals were sealed with handshakes and whispers. As a Black woman and co-founder of Apex FinTech, New York's leading financial tech firm, I'd poured my soul into this company. Starting as its first accountant, I'd invested my own savings, crunched numbers through sleepless nights, and turned a startup dream into a multimillion-dollar empire. But tonight, I was here not as the powerhouse I'd been, but as Richard's shadow, his ex-wife, invisible in my elegant cream dress that hugged my curves just right. The room buzzed with energy. Executives in tailored suits clinked glasses, laughing about the latest merger. Richard, my husband of over a decade until 6 months ago, stood at the center, his charisma drawing them in like moths to a flame. He was 48 now, silver streaking his hair, exuding that effortless confidence that had once charmed me. I lingered by his side, not speaking much, just observing. I knew every detail of the deals they discussed. I'd approved half of them back when I handled the finances. But no one acknowledged me. The younger staff, mostly in their 20s, shot glances my way, whispering behind manicured hands. "Who's that?" one murmured, loud enough for me to hear. "Richard's ex? Why is she even here?" I ignored it, sipping my sparkling water, my mind replaying the years. We'd met in business school. I was the sharp accountant from Harlem, he the ambitious visionary from the suburbs. Together, we'd launched Apex from a cramped office in Brooklyn. I'd sacrificed promotions, handled the books while raising our profile, even stepped back from the spotlight to let him shine as CEO. But cracks formed, his affairs, his growing ego, the subtle ways he diminished me in meetings, calling my ideas too conservative while stealing them. The divorce was messy, but I'd kept quiet, focusing on my shares and the life I'd rebuild. Then it happened. Richard turned to me mid-conversation, his face hardening like ice. The group around us fell silent, sensing the shift. His voice cut through the chatter, cold and deliberate, right there in front of dozens of eyes. "You shouldn't be here anymore, Serena. We're divorced. Leave now, before I have to call security." The words hit like a slap. The room seemed to freeze, glasses paused mid-air, laughter dying on lips. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of shock and fury rising like bile. Sidelong glances turned into stares, some looked away awkwardly, others smirked. No one spoke up. Not the board members I'd mentored, not the partners I negotiated with. I stood there, my dress suddenly feeling too tight, my presence reduced to an unwelcome stain on their polished evening. But I didn't crumble. My hand stayed steady, my expression neutral. Inside, though, a storm brewed. This wasn't just humiliation, it was erasure. All those years, and now I was disposable. Little did they know, I hadn't come to beg or cling. I was ready for this. The sting of Richard's words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished cigar, choking the room's false merriment. I felt the weight of every gaze, some pitying, others gleeful, as if I'd suddenly become the evening's unintended spectacle. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment, but from the raw injustice of it all. After everything I'd sacrificed for Apex, late nights balancing ledgers, risking my inheritance on our first venture capital pitch, I was now reduced to this, an intruder in my own creation. Before I could even process the betrayal, the whispers erupted like a chain reaction. A young assistant, barely out of college with her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, sidled up closer to Richard and let out a mocking chuckle. She didn't bother lowering her voice, ensuring her barbs carried. "I heard she won't sign the divorce papers because she's still hoping to claw her way back. Clinging like that, it's desperate." Her friend, another fresh-faced intern in a sleek black dress, nodded eagerly, adding fuel. "Yeah, total delusion. Who shows up uninvited like this? She must think the company still owes her something." The murmurs spread, rippling through the crowd. A middle-aged investor nearby, whom I'd once convinced to fund our expansion, averted his eyes but muttered to his companion, "Pathetic display. Black women like her always make a scene when it's over." Another voice, from a cluster of executives, chimed in, "Look at her standing there, frozen. Guess she didn't get the memo, she's yesterday's news." Laughter bubbled up, sharp and unkind, slicing through my composure. Richard didn't intervene. Instead, he turned his back fully, signaling to the group that I was no longer worth acknowledging. He raised his glass higher, as if toasting my expulsion, his smile a mask of triumph. I clenched my fists at my sides, nails digging into palms to steady myself. The humiliation twisted in my gut, a familiar ache from years of being overlooked in boardrooms, my ideas credited to others, my presence questioned because of my skin. But tonight, it was personal, amplified by the public stage. No one stepped forward to defend me. The room's silence was complicit, a collective shrug at my erasure. Then came the enforcers. 2 security guards, burly men in dark uniforms, approached swiftly from the edges of the ballroom. The older one, with a salt and pepper beard, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Ma'am, we've been instructed to escort you out. Please come with us quietly." His partner, younger and more brusque, added, "No need to make this harder. Just follow us to the exit." They positioned themselves on either side of me, one hand hovering near my elbow as if ready to guide, or drag, me away. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, watching with morbid curiosity as I became the banished one. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I held my head high, refusing to let them see me break. This wasn't the end, it was the spark. I didn't argue. I didn't let a single tear escape, though the betrayal clawed at my throat like invisible thorns. At 45, I'd faced worse, boardrooms where my voice was drowned out by egos, deals where my contributions vanished into someone else's credit. But this? This was raw, deliberate cruelty from the man I'd built everything with. My lips pressed into a thin line, and I nodded once, sharply, acknowledging the guards without granting them the satisfaction of resistance. My steps were deliberate, unhurried, each heel click echoing on the marble floor like a quiet declaration of defiance. The cream fabric of my dress shifted slightly as one guard gestured toward the exit, his fingers brushing the air near my arm, not quite touching, but close enough to remind me of my supposed place. The ballroom's grandeur mocked me as I moved, crystal chandeliers casting fractured light, tables laden with untouched hors d'oeuvres, faces blurring into a sea of indifference. Whispers followed like shadows, "Did you see that? She's actually leaving," but I tuned them out, focusing on the rhythm of my breath. My posture remained impeccable, shoulders squared, chin lifted. I'd learned long ago that crumbling fed their narratives, standing tall disrupted them. Richard's back was to me now, his laughter resuming as if I'd been a minor glitch in the evening's program. But before I fully turned away, I paused at the threshold, my gaze locking onto him across the room. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. His held a flicker of triumph, but mine were calm, almost serene, a mirror of the storm I'd weathered and survived. No rage, no plea, just the quiet certainty of someone who knew the tide was turning. It wasn't pain he saw, it was resolve, cold and unyielding, the kind forged in years of being underestimated as a black woman in Tech's ivory towers. He faltered, his smile slipping just enough for me to notice, before looking away. That was all I needed. As the guards ushered me through the double doors into the cooler hallway, my handbag vibrated softly against my side. I slipped my hand inside, glancing at the screen without breaking stride. The message glowed, a simple confirmation from Isaiah, my old ally in the state's financial oversight board. No words, just a timestamp and a secure link. I pressed the call button, holding the phone to my ear as we approached the lobby. The line connected instantly, his voice steady on the other end. I didn't waste breath on explanations, the plan was already in motion. "I'm ready," I said, my tone even, laced with finality. The guards exchanged puzzled looks but said nothing, their earlier authority waning as we reached the revolving doors. Outside, the Manhattan night air hit me like a cleanse, crisp, alive with the hum of traffic and distant sirens. I stepped into it, leaving the gilded cage behind, my mind already shifting to what came next. This exit wasn't defeat, it was the prelude to reclamation. As the revolving doors spat me into the night, I could almost hear the ballroom erupting behind me, not in outrage, but in gleeful dissection. My mind painted the scene vividly, drawing from years of navigating these circles where whispers cut deeper than shouts. Inside, the energy shifted, the void I'd left filling with barbs aimed at my absence. At the cocktail bar, a cluster of junior staffers huddled, their voices rising like steam from overpriced martinis. The assistant who'd mocked me earlier, her eyes sparkling with schadenfreude, leaned in. She really thought she could waltz back in as the boss's arm candy? Delusional. Her companion, a sharp-suited analyst fresh from Ivy League, snorted, clinging to relevance like that, it's embarrassing. Bet she's outside right now, plotting some dramatic comeback. They clinked glasses, their laughter a brittle shield against the unease my exit had stirred. Not far away, an older investor, the one who'd shaken my hand on our first big funding round, shook his head slowly over a scotch. Sad case, he murmured to his partner, a venture capitalist with a perpetual smirk. She probably can't wrap her head around being sidelined. Women in her position often struggle with letting go. His tone dripped faux sympathy, masking the relief that I was no longer a wild card in their deals. Richard, ever the orchestrator, didn't miss a beat. He poured another round of champagne, his movements fluid, commanding the room's attention. To fresh starts, he proclaimed, his voice booming with feigned optimism. The toast rippled through the crowd, glasses chiming in agreement. His personal aide, the young woman who'd been glued to his side all evening, added her twist. Some people just refuse to fade gracefully. It's like they forget the world moves on without them. She glanced toward the doors I'd exited, her lips curling in disdain, as if my presence had been a temporary blight on their polished gathering. The comments layered on, each one a fresh jab at my dignity. A marketing exec chimed in, heard she was just the numbers cruncher back in the day, nothing more. Now she's out, and we're better for it. Laughter followed, low and conspiratorial, binding them in shared superiority. Richard soaked it in, his ego inflating with every nod, oblivious to the cracks forming beneath his feet. They reveled in my supposed downfall, turning my humiliation into their entertainment, while I stood outside, the cool air sharpening my focus. This wasn't over, their words were fuel, and my silence was strategy. I paused at the grand glass doors leading to the parking lot, the city's neon glow filtering through like fractured promises. The guards flanked me, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor, a stark contrast to the muffled revelry we'd left behind. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of this orchestrated dismissal, but outwardly, I remained composed, my breathing even, my expression a mask of quiet authority. At 45, I'd navigated enough power plays in New York's cutthroat tech scene to know that words could be weapons, especially when wielded sparingly. The younger guard, with his buzz-cut and impatient stance, urged me forward, "Keep moving, ma'am. The lot's right out there." But I halted, turning slightly toward him, the reflection of the ballroom's lights dancing on the panes behind us. My voice was soft, measured, carrying just enough edge to pierce the routine of his orders. "Do you have any idea who you're handling like this?" He blinked, caught off guard, his hand dropping from where it hovered near his radio. For a split second, uncertainty flickered in his eyes, the kind that comes from questioning protocol in the face of unexpected poise. Then, he recovered with a dismissive smirk, his tone laced with condescension, "Doesn't matter to me. Orders are orders. You're just an unwelcome visitor now, nothing more." His words landed like a calculated slight, echoing the disdain I'd endured inside. I studied his face, the sharp jawline, the faint scar above his eyebrow, committing it to memory. Not for vengeance, but for the record, details like these had built my career in finance, where overlooking the small print could cost empires. I nodded slowly, acknowledging his response without conceding ground. Fair enough, I replied, my gaze steady, letting the implication linger unspoken, that his assumption might soon unravel. The older guard shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us, but he stayed silent, gesturing toward the exit once more. I resumed walking, the cool draft from the opening doors brushing my skin, invigorating rather than chilling. Outside, the valet area hummed with idling engines and distant horns, the Manhattan skyline a backdrop of indifferent steel and glass. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step distancing me from the farce inside, yet drawing me closer to the reckoning I'd prepared. The guard's retort replayed in my head, not as a wound, but as ammunition, proof of the blindness that had allowed this charade to unfold. Little did he know, his casual dismissal was the last thread in a tapestry of oversights about to come undone. The Manhattan night enveloped me as I emerged from the hotel's grand entrance, the distant rumble of taxis and pedestrians a soothing counterpoint to the venomous echoes I'd left indoors. Streetlights cast long shadows across the valet area, illuminating luxury cars lined up like silent sentinels. The guards halted at the curb, their duty apparently fulfilled, exchanging nods as if dismissing a minor inconvenience. I lingered for a moment, the crisp air sharpening my senses, carrying hints of rain on the breeze. Then, without fanfare, a sleek black SUV glided to a stop mere feet away, its tinted windows reflecting the hotel's facade like a dark mirror. The vehicle bore government plates, subtle, official markings that spoke of authority far beyond this corporate charade. A man in a crisp navy suit emerged from the driver's side, his movements precise and unhurried. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a bearing that suggested years in high-stakes environments, perhaps federal oversight or legal enforcement. He didn't speak. Instead, he rounded the hood and opened the rear passenger door with a soft click, gesturing for me to enter. I didn't rush. Instead, I turned back toward the hotel's glowing windows, where silhouettes of the gala's attendees danced like puppets in a farce. A faint smile tugged at my lips, not one of bitterness, but of quiet anticipation. The scene inside replayed in my mind, Richard's triumphant toasts, the assistant's sneers, the investor's complicit silence. They saw me as obsolete, a relic to be discarded. But relics held secrets, and mine were about to surface. Reaching into my handbag, I withdrew a small item, a gold-plated badge, its surface etched with credentials from my discreet role in state financial advisory circles. I'd earned it through years of consulting on corporate compliance, a shadow career I'd maintained even as I supported Apex. I held it just long enough for the light to catch its gleam, ensuring the guards caught a glimpse. The younger one's eyes widened fractionally, a spark of doubt crossing his features before he masked it. His partner frowned, stepping back slightly. I didn't explain, the flash was enough, a subtle harbinger. With deliberate grace, I tucked the badge away, its weight a reminder of the leverage I'd amassed. Sliding into the SUV's leather interior, I settled as the door closed with a solid thud. The driver returned to his seat, and we pulled away smoothly, merging into the flow of traffic. Through the rear window, the hotel receded, its lights dimming like fading illusions. This strange arrival wasn't coincidence, it was the first thread unraveling their web of assumptions. Inside the SUV, the leather seat cradled me as we eased into traffic, but my thoughts lingered on the gala's undercurrents. I knew the script unfolding behind those walls. Richard, ever the showman, wouldn't let my departure dampen his spotlight. Instead, he'd amplify the narrative, twisting my exit into validation for his choices. Back in the ballroom, he seized the moment, hoisting his champagne flute high amid the glittering assembly. "Life mirrors a business deal," he declared, his timbre resonant and assured. "When value diminishes, you ink the closure and advance." The phrase landed with calculated precision, eliciting chuckles from the encircled elite. It was a veiled eulogy for our marriage, for my role in Apex, framing me as expendable cargo he'd wisely offloaded. The room responded with approving nods, the sound of crystal touching crystal a symphony of complicity. His aide, the ambitious 20-something who'd eyed me with scorn all evening, leaned toward a prominent guest, her whisper carrying just far enough, "She crashed this to stir drama, won't release her grip." The investor, a balding tycoon I'd once pitched to for seed funding, grinned slyly. Nearby, a well-heeled socialite in emerald silk tittered, word is she started as mere bookkeeper. Discarded now, yet desperate to latch on. Her companion, a hedge fund manager, added, classic overreach, thinking sentiment trumps strategy. These exchanges weren't random, they built a fortress around Richard's ego, each remark a brick mortared with bias. As a black woman who'd shattered ceilings in finance, I'd encountered this playbook before, diminishing my intellect to support staff, erasing my strategic investments as footnotes. But tonight, their barbs served my purpose. Unbeknownst to them, a discreet audio device nestled in the vest pocket of a waiter I'd tipped generously beforehand captured every syllable. He'd been positioned near the bar, his tray a perfect camouflage, recording the venom for later dissection. Richard basked in the adulation, his posture exuding dominance, oblivious to the digital net closing in. The crowd's amusement peaked, conversations veering toward future ventures, my name invoked only as a punchline. They painted me as the villain in their tidy story, obsessive, outdated, while I navigated the avenues outside, the city's pulse sinking with my resolve. Their escalation wasn't unforeseen, it was the catalyst I'd anticipated, fueling the exposure to come. In the dimly lit corner of the ballroom, away from the central toast's glow, Elena Ramirez, the 35-year-old communications manager who'd joined Apex only months ago, furrowed her brow. She'd been mingling near the dessert table, her tablet in hand for quick social media updates, when the snippets of conversation pierced through. My name, Serena, kept surfacing, laced with derision, like a recurring glitch in an otherwise seamless event. As a Latina woman navigating corporate ladders herself, Elena had honed her instincts for undercurrents, something about the mockery felt off, too rehearsed. She pulled out her phone discreetly, tapping into the company's secure internal database, a perk of her role in handling PR crises. The search was swift. Serena Brooks Davis yielded archived files from the firm's early days. Her eyes widened as documents scrolled, investment approvals stamped with my signature, board minutes crediting me for securing key venture funds that catapulted Apex from obscurity to industry leader. Hold on, she muttered under her breath, piecing it together. This wasn't just a scorned spouse, I was the architect behind the financial backbone, the one who'd greenlit expansions when risks loomed high. Elena glanced around, ensuring no one noticed her distraction. She leaned toward her junior assistant, a wide-eyed recent grad named Mia, who was jotting notes on potential photo ops. Mia, listen, Elena whispered, her voice low but urgent. That woman they just tossed out? She's not merely Richard's former partner. Look at this, she orchestrated those massive seed rounds years back. Without her, half these deals wouldn't exist. Mia peered at the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to intrigue. Whoa, so why the big show? This could blow up if it leaks. Elena's mind raced, connecting dots, the abrupt escort, the pointed jabs during Richard's speech. As someone who'd faced her own share of dismissals in male-dominated spaces, she sensed a deeper ploy. This isn't adding up, she confided. If she's got that much history, why erase her now? We might be witnessing something explosive. Mia nodded, eyes darting toward Richard's circle, where the laughter still flowed freely. Elena pocketed her device, a knot forming in her stomach, the kind that signaled impending scandal. Little did she know, her quiet inquiry was the first crack in the facade, a ripple that would soon swell into a wave. From the SUV's vantage, I monitored the unfolding chaos through a secure app on my phone, live feed from the discreet camera I'd planted earlier, courtesy of Isaiah's network. The ballroom appeared serene on the surface, but tension simmered beneath. Richard commanded the podium, his speech wrapping up with polished flair, the audience hanging on his every syllable. Yet, as he descended, his pocket buzzed, a vibration I knew intimately, having timed it precisely. The message I'd queued from an anonymous burner line flashed across his screen: "You just lied. And you know it." Simple, piercing, a dagger aimed at his facade. His face drained of color, the confident veneer cracking like thin ice underfoot. He stared at the device, fingers trembling slightly as he swiped to reread. The words alluded to the fraudulent contracts he'd buried, ones I'd uncovered during our split, evidence of siphoned funds from my initial investments. He knew, we'd clashed over it privately, but now it loomed public. His aide, sensing the shift, edged closer. "Everything all right, sir?" Her concern was genuine, laced with career-preserving caution. Richard waved her off abruptly, his usual suavity fracturing. "It's nothing," he muttered, but his voice wavered, betraying the lie. He pocketed the phone hastily, scanning the room as if expecting phantoms. The crowd milled about, oblivious, resuming their networking with fresh enthusiasm, deals discussed, cards exchanged. But Richard excused himself abruptly, weaving through the throng toward a side corridor, his stride uneven, shoulders hunched. In that instant, the dynamics tilted. Whispers began anew, not about me this time, but him. "He looks off, something wrong?" An investor murmured to another. Elena, still poring over her findings, noticed his retreat and exchanged a knowing glance with her assistant. The seed of doubt I'd planted sprouted, subtle, insidious, eroding his authority from within. No grand confrontation, just a single phrase, delivered remotely, unraveling the threads of his control. As the gala continued its merry facade, unaware of the seismic shift, I leaned back in the seat, the city lights streaking past. This wasn't spectacle, it was precision. His empire, built on my foundations, now teetered on the precipice I'd engineered. The night air hummed with possibility, and for the first time that evening, I felt the balance restore itself. The SUV idled at the curb, its engine a low purr blending with the city's nocturnal symphony. I stepped out, the pavement cool beneath my heels, my resolve hardening like tempered steel. The hotel's facade loomed, a monument to the evening's farce, but my focus sharpened on the approaching vehicle, an elongated black limousine, its polished surface catching glints from overhead lamps. Government plates adorned it, a subtle emblem of influence that cut through the mundane traffic. The car halted smoothly, and the rear door swung open. Out stepped Isaiah Davis, 50, his frame solid and commanding in a tailored charcoal suit. Flanked by two discreet bodyguards in understated attire, he exuded the quiet power of someone who'd navigated Albany's corridors for decades as New York's financial security advisor. His dark skin, marked by faint lines from years of high-pressure negotiations, mirrored my own resilience. We'd bonded in college economics classes, allies in a field that rarely welcomed faces like ours. Now, he was my anchor in this storm. "Serena," he greeted, his voice gravelly yet warm, extending a hand. No pleasantries wasted, we'd coordinated this hours earlier. The paperwork's solid. We've secured affidavits confirming your majority stake, plus irrefutable proof of Richard's manipulations, diverted funds from those early rounds you seeded. He handed me a slim tablet, screen illuminating scanned ledgers, forged signatures, offshore transfers I'd suspected during our dissolution. I scanned the files briefly, nodes of validation clicking into place. "You've outdone yourself, Isaiah. From our old study sessions to this, thank you." My tone carried gratitude laced with steel. He was more than a contact, a brother in arms against systemic oversights that plagued entrepreneurs of color. One bodyguard scanned the perimeter, while the other held a briefcase, likely containing hard copies for immediate deployment. Isaiah nodded, his eyes flicking toward the hotel entrance. "This isn't just about reclaiming shares, it's exposing the rot. Your intel on those contracts was the key." We traced them back to his inner circle. A faint smile creased his face, rare in our line of work. "Ready to walk back in?" I straightened, the weight of the tablet grounding me. The night air invigorated, carrying scents of impending rain. This arrival marked the pivot, from outcast to orchestrator. With Isaiah at my side, the pieces aligned, ready to shatter the illusions within. As Isaiah and I approached the hotel's revolving doors, flanked by his discreet escorts, the plan's culmination pulsed through me like an electric current. The lobby's polished floors reflected our determined strides, leading us back toward the ballroom where the gala's facade still held. I clutched the tablet, its data a silent arsenal, ready to deploy. We entered without announcement, the hum of conversations dipping as heads turned. Richard stood at the podium's edge, rapping a follow-up remark on innovative horizons, his audience captive. But the large projection screen behind him flickered abruptly, hacked via the secure link I'd activated moments earlier. The slide shifted from corporate graphs to a bold, unmissable declaration: new owner announcement, Serena Brooks Davis, co-founder and strategic shareholder, resuming leadership after 5 years. A hush descended, thick and absolute, as if the air had been vacuumed from the space. Glasses hovered mid-sip, smiles froze into masks of bewilderment. Richard pivoted slowly, his eyes locking on the display, color leaching from his features until he resembled a ghost in his tailored tuxedo. His mouth parted, but no sound emerged, only a strangled gasp as realization dawned. Simultaneously, a cascade of notifications chimed across the room, internal emails dispatched at precisely 7:02 p.m., confirming my reinstated authority. Phones buzzed in pockets and purses, attendees fumbling to check. The message was concise, irrefutable: board resolutions, share registries, all bearing my name as majority holder. Whispers erupted: "What? She's back? This can't be real." Elena, from her corner, stared wide-eyed, her earlier suspicions validated. She clutched her device, scrolling frantically. Richard staggered a step, gripping the podium for support. His empire, meticulously curated, now exposed as built on borrowed foundations, mine. The crowd's allegiance wavered, investors exchanged uneasy glances, recalculating alliances. His aide hovered nearby, her earlier smugness evaporated, murmuring futile reassurances he ignored. I advanced steadily through the parted throng, Isaiah a steadfast presence beside me. No need for dramatics, the facts spoke volumes. At 45, I'd reclaimed what was rightfully mine, not through pleas, but proof. The room's energy inverted, curiosity morphing into deference as realization sank in. This revelation wasn't chaos, it was restoration, a meticulously timed unveiling that stripped away illusions. The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap's aftermath, the ballroom's chatter dissolving into stunned murmurs. I advanced through the parted crowd, Isaiah a silent pillar beside me, his presence amplifying the shift in power. Faces that had mocked me earlier now registered dawning horror, eyes widening, postures slumping as the truth sank in. Elena approached first, her earlier skepticism replaced by contrition. She edged toward me, tablet clutched like a shield, her voice a hushed plea: "I apologize for not seeing it sooner. How can I assist?" Her words carried genuine remorse, a crack in the corporate armor she'd worn all night. I met her gaze evenly, acknowledging the pivot without warmth. "Start by reviewing the archives properly next time," I replied, my tone level, leaving her nodding vigorously as she stepped aside. Richard, however, unraveled spectacularly. He gripped the podium's edge, knuckles white, his commanding facade crumbling into disarray. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he stammered, "You orchestrated all this? To destroy me?" His accusation trembled, laced with desperation, eyes darting wildly as if seeking an escape route. The man who'd dismissed me publicly now stood exposed, his empire's architect revealed as the one he'd tried to bury. His aide retreated, her confidence evaporating. She averted her eyes, whispering futile excuses to no one. The room's energy inverted, investors who had toasted his vision now muttered about liabilities, their alliances fracturing. The young staffers, once bold in their scorn, fell silent, faces flushed with embarrassment. One assistant who jeered loudest now fidgeted with her necklace, avoiding my path as I ascended the steps to the stage. I claimed the microphone without haste, the spotlight warm on my skin. The audience leaned in, breath held. At 45, I'd learned that vengeance was hollow, true power lay in restoration. "This isn't retribution," I stated calmly, my voice resonating through the speakers. "I'm simply retrieving what I constructed and surrendered for affection, not duty." The words landed with precision, eliciting gasps and nods. Richard slumped further, his world tilting irreversibly. No theatrics needed, the facts dismantled him. As I descended, the applause began, tentative at first, then swelling, marking not just my return, but the end of illusions. After my declaration echoed through the speakers, I relinquished the microphone with deliberate calm, the applause swelling around me like a tide I neither sought nor needed. At 45, I'd long outgrown the craving for validation from rooms like this. The facts had spoken, reshaping the narrative without further elaboration from me. I descended the steps, my gaze fixed ahead, deliberately avoiding Richard's crumpled form at the podium's base. He stood there, a shell of his former arrogance, but I offered no glance, no pity, no triumph. His downfall was his own construction, mine was ascent. The crowd parted silently as I moved through them, the earlier venom replaced by a palpable deference. Faces that had sneered now averted downward, shoulders slumping under the weight of their misjudgments. The young assistants clustered near the bar, their earlier bravado evaporated, one fiddled with a napkin, another stared at her shoes, their whispers silenced. Investors who chuckled at my expense now stood rigid, recalculating their positions in this new hierarchy. Elena hovered at the periphery, her expression a mix of awe and regret, but I passed without acknowledgement. Her role in the shift was minor, her apology unnecessary now. I traversed the long banquet tables, laden with half-eaten delicacies and abandoned flutes, the very spots where mockery had flourished minutes before. The air hung heavy with unspoken apologies, the clink of cutlery absent as hands froze mid-motion. No one dared speak, their avoidance was concession enough. The grand doors loomed ahead, framing the night beyond, and I pushed through them into the lobby's cooler expanse. Outside, the limousine waited, its sleek form a beacon under the hotel's awning. Headlights pierced the darkness, casting elongated shadows across the driveway. Isaiah stood by the open rear door, his stance patient and professional, a nod of solidarity as I approached. The cream fabric of my gown caught the beam's reflection, shimmering subtly against the evening's backdrop. I slid into the plush interior without a backward peek, the door closing with a definitive softness. As we pulled away, the hotel receded in the mirror, its lights fading into irrelevance. Order had realigned, not through clamor, but through undeniable truth. In that quiet departure, I embraced the transformation, leaving the remnants of their illusions scattered in my wake. The morning after, New York's media landscape ignited with my story, headlines splashing across digital feeds and print editions like wildfire through dry brush. Grainy photos captured my composed exit beside the limousine, my silhouette framed against the hotel's illuminated entrance. Ousted woman revealed as true Apex owner, silent reclamation shakes fintech giant, blared the New York Post. Business Insider delved deeper, from humiliation to helm, Serena Brooks Davis's masterful corporate comeback. Reporters dissected the gala's footage, praising my poise amid the uproar, dubbing it a lesson in strategic silence. Social platforms exploded. Twitter threads analyzed the video of my stage moment, where I faced Richard without flinching. Hashtags like #SilentPower and #ReclaimYourEmpire trended, amassing millions of views overnight. Influencers reposted clips, my final words echoing, "No one becomes obsolete when they've forged the empire from scratch." Comments flooded in, women of color sharing parallel tales of erasure, executives debating ethics in boardrooms. LinkedIn buzzed with endorsements from former colleagues I'd mentored, their posts lauding my foresight in retaining shares. Podcasts picked it up by noon, dissecting the fraud allegations Isaiah's team had leaked subtly to select outlets. This isn't just a divorce drama, one host intoned. It's a blueprint for underrepresented leaders reclaiming space. Stock tickers flickered, Apex shares dipped amid scrutiny, investors demanding transparency. Richard's profile vanished from the company's site, his silence deafening amid the clamor. I scrolled through it all from my penthouse balcony, coffee steaming in hand. The coverage wasn't vindication, it was amplification, turning personal betrayal into a broader dialogue on equity in tech. Messages poured in, offers for speaking gigs, alliances from venture firms. Yet, I responded sparingly, letting the narrative evolve organically. This exposure illuminated shadows I'd navigated alone for years. 1 week later, sunlight filtered through the glass railing of my penthouse terrace in Upper East Side, casting warm patterns on the teak floor. I sat there, a steaming mug of chamomile in hand, the city's skyline a distant canvas of ambition and grit. The whirlwind of media frenzy had subsided into a steady hum, articles archived, hashtags fading, but the personal shift lingered, subtle and profound. Down at the hotel, a modest bronze plaque now adorned the lobby wall, its inscription etched with care. In this space, a woman once overlooked demonstrated grace and resilience. Dedicated to Serena Brooks Davis. Elena had initiated it, her email to me brief yet sincere, a quiet amends for her initial oversight. She'd rallied the staff, turning my moment into a subtle monument, a reminder etched in metal for passers-by to ponder. I rose, crossing to the side table where an old photograph rested, Richard and I, beaming at our first contract signing, ink still fresh on the page. The image captured a different era, my calculations fueling his dreams, our partnership unmarred by ego's corrosion. No bitterness stirred as I examined it, only closure, like sealing a final ledger. I placed it gently in a drawer, turning the key with a soft click, locking away the chapter without regret. Leaning against the railing, I whispered to the breeze, "I've crossed that bridge." The words dissolved into the air, freeing something within. At 45, my path forward gleamed, new ventures in equitable finance, mentorship for underrepresented founders. The transformation wasn't loud, it was internal, a quiet evolution from shadow to sovereign. The city below pulsed onward, and so did I, unburdened, renewed.